Hey guys, today I'm putting the 5700X3D up against the 9800X3D in Escape from Tarkov 1.0 to show you the raw difference between these two legendary chips. I don't want to waste your time, so let's jump right into it. Before we dive into the benchmarks, here are the setups I used for testing. The 9800X3D was run on an ASRock X870E Nova motherboard paired with 64 gigs of DDR5 running at 6000 CL30. For storage, I used an Aorus 10K Gen 5 NVMe SSD. I'm running a plus 200 boost clock override and a minus 40 undervolt with a maxed out F clock at 2200 MHz. The U clock and M clock are synchronized 1-to-1. If you want to see the exact tuning setup for this chip, check out my tuning video. There's a link in the upper right hand corner or in the video description below. The 5700X3D is running on a Gigabyte X570 master motherboard paired with 64 gigs of DDR4 running at 3600 CL16. For storage, I have a Sabrent Rocket 4 Plus. It is running a minus 30 undervolt. The F clock, M clock, and U clock are synchronized at 1-to-1-to-1 at 1800 MHz. SMT is off on both chips, and resizable bar is enabled for both as well. And handling graphics for both setups is the Zotac 5090 Solid. In terms of in-game settings, I use the equivalent of my optimized Pure 80 settings with ultra textures. These seem to have replaced the old high textures, but I'll have an updated optimization guide and an updated settings guide coming soon as well, so keep an eye out for those. To really stress these CPUs as much as possible for this comparison, I use the most demanding route on the most demanding map in Tarkov, which is Streets of Tarkov. I ran my usual path down Klimov Street into Lexos. Keep in mind, these numbers are going to look lower than the typical average FPS you might see in a real raid, because I'm only focusing on this route. And that's intentional. So like I said, your actual raid averages will probably be higher than the numbers you're going to see here. This route just gives us the best apples to apples CPU comparison. At 1080 offline with no AI, the gap is pretty massive between these two chips. The 98 pushes about 65% more average FPS and the lows follow right behind. This is the clearest CPU bound scenario in the whole test, but to be fair, every single scenario was CPU bound. But the lead for the 98 is highlighted the most in this test. At 1440, the scaling is basically identical. It's a 64% gain in averages and 59 to 63% in the lows. Even when the GPU load rises a tiny bit because the resolution went up, we're still CPU bound overall. Streets is really punishing on the CPU this wipe, and the 9800X3D keeps pretty much the same lead here. And surprisingly, even in 4K offline, where we'd normally expect the GPU to start playing more of a role, the 98 still holds about a 65% uplift across the board. And like I said earlier, this just shows how CPU bound we are on Streets of Tarkov this wipe, which is not good for performance overall, but good for this test. Once we go online, the difference tightens up a little bit. The 9800X3D is about 53% faster in averages and lows. Network load, server tick, player activity, AI, assets, and all that shift the bottleneck a tiny bit. The gap isn't as extreme, but it's still really large. In 1440 online, this stays consistent with around a 53% uplift for the 98 in both average FPS and 1% lows. The 0.1% lows were about 57% higher, and we're still in the same ballpark for differences between the two chips here, whether we're in 1080 or 1440. And lastly, even at 4K online, we're still seeing a 54% gain in averages. The most noticeable stat here is the 63% improvement in 0.1% lows. The 9800X3D has more stable frame times in online play on Streets in the heaviest part of the heaviest map in the game, whereas the 57 dips a little harder in the most demanding areas of the most demanding map. So across all resolutions, offline or online, the 9800X3D consistently lands between 50 to 65% higher FPS than the 5700X3D. Biggest jumps are obviously in 1080 offline, but the differences stay around the same ballpark no matter what scenario we're in, to be honest. Usually when I do these tests, there are usually some differences when I move up in resolution, but in 1.0, for whatever reason, we stay extremely CPU bound, and whatever they've done to Klimov Street this wipe is especially hard on the CPU. So here's a quick cost per FPS breakdown of the two CPUs. I tested both with 64 gigs of RAM since in all my previous benchmarks, 64 gives consistently better results than 32 in Tarkov in terms of frame time, consistency, and smoothness. And because RAM prices have exploded recently, nearly tripling due to AI companies buying up massive amounts of DRAM, memory has become a major part of the upgrade equation. Using current retail pricing, a 9800X3D paired with 64 gigs of DDR5 comes in around $880, while a 5700X3D with 64 gigs of DDR4 off the secondhand market sits closer to $550. You might find better deals depending on where you live or with upcoming sales, especially with Black Friday stuff coming up, but these are the most common price points right now. When you look at cost per FPS, both CPUs actually land very close. They're within 10% or less of each other across all resolutions. The difference is in raw performance. The 9800X3D is delivering 50 to 65% more FPS, but the overall dollar to FPS value stays competitive on both sides. So here's the bottom line. If you're already on AM4, the 5700X3D is still one of the best value upgrades you can make. It's a really nice performance bump without having to break the bank for an AM5 platform swap. But if you're building a new system or coming from an older AMD or Intel setup, then 9800X3D is absolutely the move. It's not cheap, but it has good value in terms of the performance it's going to give you, and it gives you a platform with a good bit of longevity for now. Either way, both chips offer strong value. It just depends on your budget, your current platform, and the FPS target you're trying to hit. So that's all I got for this one, guys. I hope it was helpful. If it was, please consider dropping a like and subscribing. It really supports the channel and helps me to continue bringing you hardware comparisons like this. And if not, thanks for being here anyways. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.